All right, so I'm going to hit share screen here, and we will get started. All right. Okay.
It's loading.
It is loading, and we'll get there. Okay. All right, so this is the second in our series on parenting, and it's a parenting workshop. And speaking of which, we just had our 6-year-old come in and asked to be tucked in, so there goes Joel. All right, so we're all in this together with loud kids and kids who interrupt, and yeah, we get it. So a little bit about Youth Crossroads. So Youth Crossroads, we're a nonprofit community-based organization, and we work in Cicero and in Berwyn. And oh man, we just locked the door. Sorry, hold on just one second. Okay, all right. So really we have after school programs, we have youth leadership programs, we do counseling services, and we've been around for over 40 something years. So primarily we focus on Berwyn and Cicero. A little bit about us. This is us and our boys. We have been married for over 12 years, been together for over 16. We have Justice, he's our 8-year-old. He'll be in 3rd grade. And Deacon is gonna be in 1st grade, and they go to Cicero West Elementary School. You wanna talk a little bit about what you do? No? Okay.
You covered it.
All right. Okay, so I do want to say one thing I think is important, because we're going to talk a lot about COVID, is for some people, we're all in the same storm. You know, the world kind of feels like it's falling apart all around us, I think, every time I read some new news article. But we're not in the same boat. So for some of us, this may be sort of a time to relax and spend time with our family. I think after doing this for 3 months, no one really feels very relaxed. But, you know, for some people, there's health concerns, and maybe families have lost loved ones to COVID, or, you know, been sick themselves. For other people, there's some significant financial challenges, or housing challenges, or food insecurities. And so while we're going to talk about what it's like to parent through COVID for our own experience, we know that that may line up with some of your own feelings and experiences in your family, but it may be different. And so I just encourage you to point out what you're experiencing, and what maybe what are unique challenges to you, because they might not just be unique to you, but other people in the group may feel them as well. That's good. Do you want to read that?
No. you just put it together. So
okay, so I came across this quote from Michelle Obama, who I think does a wonderful job when it talks about parenting and some of the challenges. And it said, "To be a good parent, you need to take care of yourself so that you can have the physical and emotional energy to take care of your family." And I think that this is true for moms, for dads, for aunts, uncles, grandparents. We really, if we want to take care of the people that we love, we need to make sure that we're in a good place. So we're not going to talk too much about that during today's talk, but next week and the following week, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about how to take care of ourselves as caring adults who are impacted by this stuff as well.
So we want to go through a few different things specifically around COVID. So you want to talk about this, and then
yeah, so I feel like this is really applicable in our family. So last night Joel and I were watching Netflix, and our 8-year-old kept coming into the room, and he was crying, and at first we kind of thought, oh, it's just him not wanting to go to bed, and then by like the 4th time he kept coming in. You know, he was like, I'm really scared, you know, and I asked him, Justice, what are you so scared of? And he said, I think people are going to die. I think people in our family are going to die. I think my friends are going to die. You know, what do you think they're going to die of? I think they're going to die from coronavirus. You know, and so this stuff is impacting our kids, right? It's impacting elementary school age kids. It's impacting younger kids than that, you know, preschool, toddlers. It's definitely impacting our high schoolers. And so I think it's really important to not minimize our kids' fears. And it can be really easy to just say, oh, it's not that big of a deal, or you're fine, we're taking care of you. But to really give them time and space to express what they're really concerned about. Remember that we are our kids' sole source oftentimes of information around this stuff. And so to have a good conversation with them, an age-appropriate conversation, but a conversation about what's going on in the world and what they're afraid of, and what are some things that you're doing to take care of the family. So I think it's really important to be honest with them and not hide this stuff, because it's impacting everyone's life. So recognize that your kids have these feelings, and validate those feelings, but also, you know, try to help them not sit there. So I didn't just go, oh, Justice, I'm sorry, you're anxious, tough, you know, right? But we talked about, okay, what are some things that we're doing as a family to keep you safe? How can you stop those anxious thoughts and turn them to more positive things? So, you know, I told him, hey, when you think about these anxious thoughts, I want you to tell your worry brain, stop being worried and think about all the good things that go on in his life. And so he really, when he's feeling anxious, he needs me to tell him what are some good things. So I said, okay, so think about, remember how we played Legos? I want you to think about playing basketball in the backyard with Daddy. And I want you to think about a camping trip we went on, you know? And so I gave him very tangible things to sort of shift his focus. Another thing you can do when it comes to thinking about your child's fears is helping them connect to other people, right? So a lot of times these fears are around those relationships and the people that they love. And so how can we make sure that they are staying in contact and that we're continuing to help provide this supportive network of people that love and care for them? So FaceTiming, or, you know, instant messaging, or whatever ways you can allow them to sort of continue to expand and stay in touch with their support network.
Instant messaging?
All right, whatever. I'm old. Model how to manage those feelings, right? So, you know, talking about your own concerns, and then these are some things that I'm doing when I feel anxious, or when I feel sad, or when I feel angry. You know, I may want to respond this way, but I remind myself of certain truths, right? So you're modeling this behavior about emotional regulation to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I had a mentor in college, and he'd say, you know, feelings and emotions are real and they're valid. They just can't be in the driver's seat. And so I think that that's important for us as parents to realize, and then also to help, you know, help our students develop, or sorry, I'm so used to calling young people students, help our kids develop that as well, right? So to not be dismissive and you know, minimize how they're feeling, but to also help them understand that they have control over how those feelings affect them, and that the feelings can't be the ones that are calling the shots for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think also for these next couple ones, tell your child before you leave. Again, this gets to predictability, just letting them know, because they might be afraid if you go to work for a longer period of time, or that they wake up and they don't realize that you had left for the grocery store or whatever. Giving them things to look forward to, thinking about the future. And then this last one is offer extra hugs and say, I love you more often. And this just, again, continues to establish that security that, hey, you're there for them. You're creating this loving and supportive environment. And when things feel scary, that physical embrace can mean a lot, even for the older kids. It can be really important.
So with the looking forward to thing, I think that's, so I was, you know, at Youth Crossroads, I work with middle school and high school students, and I had a relatively lengthy conversation. We did some volunteer work in one of our parks in Berwyn, and I was talking to one of our high schoolers today, and she told me this lengthy story about how her sister and her best friends spent 2 months planning a surprise birthday party for her, and, you know, she like in the morning, I guess she like walked out of the bathroom and they like popped one of those confettis, and I was like, "Did it scare you?" She said yes. But I think that it was like really, I think so much of this time during this time things are unpredictable, and depending on how your kids are processing this stuff, there isn't always a lot of things to look forward to. School's going to look different for this next school year. For our high school students, there's a lot of anxiety about next steps in life. What's college going to look like? What does work look like? There's anxiety around family members getting sick and so forth. And so I think that giving them positive things to look forward to is, and it can just be little stuff. You can just, on Monday, you can decide, hey, on Saturday, we're going to do this together as a family. And that's something that they can really all get excited about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think you changed the slide. Did it change?
Wait, which one?
I don't know. It's still
The
the
screen,
first one.
the screen that we see still says is the quote from Michelle Obama.
Oh man.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right.
I don't know if that was everyone or just us, but
All right. We will try this again. All
So you're
right.
saying the conversation never stops.
Can you see that now? Yep.
That's
Okay.
what you
now
are right
now we can see it. Yeah.
Perfect.
But
Yes.
So I think this is specifically in regards to like the world changing and COVID. Last week we talked a lot about the importance of good communication, and depending on your age of your child, again, like Jackie was saying, you might be the primary source of them getting information around from the world, but you might not be. And because of that, there's so much misinformation. I think it's really important that we don't just have this conversation one time and then we think that we solved all their questions for them. We kind of continue to bring this stuff up. We continue to ask them, hey, do you have any questions? How are you feeling about going back to school?
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling about, you're not being able to see your friends as much? How do you feel about that? Just the importance of it's on us as parents. It's not up to our kids, no matter what their age, whether they're 3 or they're 15 or they're 23. It's on us as parents to initiate conversations with our kids. We should not expect our kids to initiate conversation with us in any stage, right? Even as as our kids move into adolescence and adulthood, if we want to have good communication with our children, it's on us to establish that good communication with them and to take initiative. We should never expect our 3-year-old or 6-year-old or 10-year-old or 17-year-old. It's not on them to develop good communication patterns. It's on us to develop good communication.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, on that note, is it's never too early to start having conversations with our kids. I know Kiev and Chrissy, you guys have little ones, but they're still picking up on stuff. I've studied a lot about trauma, and trauma impacts kids, even before they're born. But this early few months, we can see that family trauma impacts them. And so how are you creating that nurturing and loving environment? You're not going to talk to your 1-year-old necessarily about coronavirus, but you might talk to your 3-year-old about why people are wearing masks and how we're trying to keep them healthy and safe, right? And so they are watching, they are picking up on our own stress and our own anxiety. And so it's important to have those conversations with them.
So can you all see the slide shift and right now? Did the slide change? Okay, good. Okay. So so just from our own experience, again, it feels like the beginning of quarantine in February was like 20 years ago, but it was only a few months ago. Mm-hmm. So I think like March 18th was like the second day that we were all home. And it was like that night, Jackie and I were like frantically, okay, we need to sit down. We need to like set ground rules for what it's, like the day 1 and 2 of quarantine, the boys home, us both being home. It was just like a free for all. Like, okay, we need to set ground rules. And so I think in any stage of parenting, COVID aside, having family routines is really important. And again, it's that much more important now. So I think oftentimes what situations like this do is they just further put a magnifying glass on what already exists, right? So kind of the additional stressors. If as a family you tend to already have good communication, you're going to tend to have good communication during COVID as well. If your family, tends to be somewhat dysfunctional and there's a lot of fighting, or there's, a lot of passive aggressiveness, that's probably heightens during this time. So whether it's COVID or not, having healthy family routines, I think, is really important. Again, depending on the stage of your child, it'll depend on how that routine looks, but having some kind of consistency. And I know that I don't think anyone here, except for Terry, has anybody older than 10. But even for middle school and high school students, the consistent bedtime. I work with so many middle school and high school students that have really, really, really horrible sleep hygiene. And now during COVID, man, kids like sleep schedule, they like fall asleep at 5 a.m. and wake up at 2 in the afternoon. We'll be running program with high school students at 1 in the afternoon, and they'll be like, yeah, I just woke up. Which I guess maybe that's not the worst thing. But consistent routines and really helping your family have structure and have some kind of consistency, and understanding that there's so much inconsistency in the world. The world looks different now, right? Like whether that's the fact that like maybe we're home more, or grocery stores look different. Our 8-year-old, he like popped into a store, obviously had a mask on. This is like 2 or 3 weeks ago. He popped into a store and he's like, Dad, I haven't been in a store in 3 months. And that was him. And obviously I knew that, right? He hadn't been in a store because we normally take him to stores, and he hadn't, but he picked up on that, right? And he knows that he's not tagging along with us, to go to the grocery store anymore, and he's not tagging along with me to do a Home Depot run, or you, I guess, to do a Home Depot run. He knows that things are different, and so as the world is kind of shifting around them, we have the ability, in some regard, to provide stability, and routines translate to children as structure and stability. It's as much as they want to push back against that, they want to have a later bedtime, and they want to do something different. There's obviously room for flexibility, but that regular routine is really important. And I don't think we need to read all this stuff, but some of these are encouraging both individual routines as well as family routines together.
Mm-hmm.
Can I talk real quick about this?
Yeah.
This is where we're doing the routine, the health inventory?
No.
Okay.
All right. So
the slide switched.
Yep. The new slide, positive discipline. Okay, good. So one of the things that I think is really hard for us as parents sometimes is to figure out how to toe that line between, discipline that is punitive and sort of laying down the law, and sort of this positive discipline approach, which can be less reactive and more preventative sometimes, and filled more with grace and love. And so I've talked to some parents, and because the world feels like it's falling apart all around them, they want to just say, I'm just going to let anything go. Anything goes right now because we're all sort of in crisis. And I would challenge you that that's probably not the best approach for kids, because kids need that structure, right? They need to know that there is right and wrong in this world. They need to know that as parents, we are helping to continue to mold them into good human beings who make wise choices. And so I challenge parents to sort of take that positive discipline approach. So don't ignore bad behavior, just as you wouldn't in a non-COVID world. Redirect it. If you have a 3-year-old who's hitting their, brother, just as you normally would, make it a point to say, no, that's not okay. We're going to have you do something different, right? Be creative. A lot of younger kids, especially in that elementary school age, they process through things through play. So through drawing, through acting it out, Legos, storytelling. Spend some time with them. In that creative play, you can teach lessons that way. Reading books with them can also be really, really important in helping them understand and make sense of the world around them. Choose how you direct your attention. So kids are always looking for attention. That attention can be used to reinforce good behaviors and discourage others. So for example, if my 6-year-old is yelling for my attention from the kitchen and I'm in the bedroom, he'll stand there and yell, "Mom, mom, 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 mom." And I can choose to, have this conversation from the other side of the house, or I can ignore it. He'll eventually come to me because he wants my attention, and I'll say, "Hey, Deacon, you don't yell at me from the other side of the house. If you want to have a conversation, come find me," right? Or earlier tonight, as Joel and I were talking about some stuff, the kids kept coming in and interrupting us. And so we were like, "Hold on, we're talking right now. You can stand there and wait patiently. And then when we're finished with this thought, then we'll acknowledge and you can participate in the conversation." But if we're constantly giving into their interruptions, then we're reinforcing that behavior where it just keeps going. Knowing when not to respond, I think that this can be really hard sometimes because our stress level is heightened in the midst of COVID. And so there are times where we just don't have the capacity to respond in a positive way. So we might need to take a step out. We might need to close the bathroom door and lock it and take a few breaths before we can respond, because we're not in a good place to have that conversation right now. So again, if there's dangerous behavior, that you obviously need to address that right away. And think about how you can reward and reinforce good behavior. So a lot of times, we do a lot of rewards or reinforcing around school-related activities, but that's not going on right now. So are there other ways that we can reinforce good behavior? So we have a point system in our house where kids can do extra chores so they have like their usual chores, but then extra chores gives them points. And then with points, they can buy La Michoacana, or they can buy a movie night, so we'll watch Netflix and we'll get to stay up a little bit later, or dessert after dinner. And so these points can be very motivating for kids to do well.
The points also help kind of reduce some conflicts, because, I mean, you don't have to do something like that, but creating guidelines and saying, "Hey, this, and this is what we expect. And if you do that, then this is like the reward." I think that just helps with like, then you're not having a conflict about everything, right? Like every few minutes, "No, go do this." Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you. Since you have 2 boys, if one of them reaches enough points to get ice cream and the other one doesn't, do you go and one doesn't get it?
Yep.
Yep.
Or if you watch a movie, one doesn't get to watch the movie?
Yeah. So
Wow.
with like,
Okay.
Yeah, our boys are also like, as are any kids, they're like really sneaky too. So they'll be like, "Well, what if like I buy the movie, it's my points, but then like he can still stay and watch the movie, like he didn't pay for it." But and so like, if we, they can like buy water balloons to have a water balloon fight in the backyard. Well, like what if we both go half and half on it? Like we both put in. I mean, but that's all kind of fun, right? I mean, they're not being. I mean, there's a level of mischievousness, but it's also like, then we're teaching them good negotiation skills.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, but if like one doesn't watch the movie, do one of you sit out with him in the other room, or do you like what? Has that happened? I guess.
Yeah. So like, one had enough points to stay up late, and the other one had to go to bed early. And normally they go to bed at the same time. And so, yeah, we put the kid to bed. But honestly, I was expecting to be this sort of big conflict, and I was sort of bracing for it all evening. But it was like, no, I don't have the points, and so I'm going to bed. And it to me, it was a great example of choices and consequences that we're like constantly trying to teach them. Hey, you made this choice. You didn't want to clean up the backyard for extra points, so now you don't get the dessert or the movie or whatever. Yeah. And sometimes we'll show grace and we'll say, "Okay, you can share your points," because they'll say, "Oh, can I share my points with so-and-so?" you know, if it hasn't been a really bad day or rough day, then sure, you can share your points.
You know, Carissa, also this isn't the case for us at this moment anymore, but at one point, because we kind of have like one of our family routines is like we eat dinner and then like the boys take a shower or bath or whatever, they brush their teeth, they get ready for bed, and then we'll like watch, kind of unwind and watch something as a family for half an hour. And so for quite a while, it almost never happens anymore, but for quite a while, one of our kids just, it wasn't the best eater and like wouldn't finish his dinner. And so we're like, okay, I mean, we'd give him grace and say, okay, you need to eat half of it or whatever. And then at some point it's just like, okay, you have a choice. You can either finish it and then you get to watch something, or you can just not finish it and then just go to bed. And there was crying and gnashing of teeth, but eventually he would realize he made a decision. He had to go to bed, and the needle eventually moved, right? And luckily, like I said, we're not still there.
But I think it was that consistency of, hey, I can't manipulate you because you're not going to give in to me. And really, he's a very good eater now. So part of that might be age too.
Should have seen the bowl of spaghetti he had today. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So I think one thing, and this is particularly true for older kids, but even younger kids, as we're considering about what to do when it comes to going back to school, or any sort of social gathering in terms of friendships and mask wearing and all of this kind of stuff, I think it's really important for us to be really clear with our children about what our expectation is. So I found this in an article, and it just talked about sort of having these conversations with our kids about how to be safe. And so I like this, maybe because I'm kind of a math person, but they talked about the ventilation, size of space. So what kind of space that the kids are going to be in, the number of people, must wear masks, and like what kind of shared objects would they have, and then how long is reasonable to have that kid comply, right? So if you have a 3-year-old and you're asking them to wear a mask, maybe 20 minutes might be the most that you could have them wear a mask. For our kids, it's a little bit longer, right? Because we're teaching them, they're older, they have the ability to keep a mask on for a little bit longer. But having these very direct conversations with our kids, I think is crucial, so that they understand, hey, you're not just making this because you're a mean parent, but because you're trying to keep them safe. And there's all these factors that you're considering when you're making the rules. And then if your kids are in high school, I think helping them understand and be part of the decision-making process in what are appropriate social activities that they can participate in and what are ones that they just can't. And this is going to be different for every family. You're really going to have to think through this as a family unit, because there's no real clear-cut, easy way to make these decisions.
I think communicating upfront with anytime, with anything, you can communicate upfront with your kids about what to expect, is really helpful. So rather, and if you have a spouse or there's co-parenting, making sure that you and the other parents or the other guardians are on the same page is also really important. But have those conversations beforehand. So one, you're not put in a situation where you're trying to make up this stuff on the fly, but also, even if you're not making it up on the fly, that your child doesn't think that you're making it up on the fly. So you've already kind of laid everything out. Hey, this is about what's going to happen, and we know that things change. So one of our kids really likes to know what's going to happen, and then for the plan to not deviate off of that. So part of it is helping understand, hey, life changes, things change, and flexibility is important. But also we can do our part to communicate that stuff beforehand. Mm-hmm. And as we begin, maybe we already have, but as we're engaging more people in the world, we're going over to our kids' Tia's house or whatever. We're going to go to church or go to the park or something like that. The way we navigate those spaces and those relationships just look different now. So anytime we can communicate that stuff beforehand, will hopefully reduce some of their anxiety.
Mm-hmm. And I think just making sure that there's going to be lots of competing information, and so that you're being clear with them, hey, this is the decisions that we're making for our family. and that you're making that clear with people that are coming over to the house. You know, does the babysitter understand where you guys are at as a family? Does your extended family that you're going over for barbecues or not going over for barbecues, do you know where you stand as well? So that can help reduce some conflict.
Okay, so one of the things that, you know, in all your free time that you have, I said that sarcastically, if you're able to, carve out some time, either do this on your own or do this in conversation, again, with your spouse or other guardians, depending on the age of your child, do this with your child, but do a little bit of an inventory of how each family member is doing, right? So you, with yourself, and then, you know, maybe, I don't know, maybe that could be touchy if you're doing an inventory of your spouse, but, you know, of your kids. And so Jackie kind of wrote this up, which is really helpful. So the psychological, the physical, and the relational, which I'll get into. So I have a mentor. We haven't met recently, but we used to meet once a month. And what he always does whenever we meet is he checks in with me on 6 different categories. How I'm doing in life. And so those categories are, hopefully I can remember them. They're how am I doing physical health-wise, so health. How am I doing spiritually? How am I doing in my relationship with my family? So that's my kids and my extended family. How am I doing in my relationship with my wife? She gets her own separate category. That's 4. How am I doing at work? And how am I doing socially with other people? And what that has, I mean, it's such a simple check-in, but it's been a really profound shift in my life, because what I realized before that check-in is when I did an examination of my life, I tended to be like doing really well in one category and not as good in another category. So maybe I was like prioritizing fitness a little bit more. So I was like going on runs and exercising and so forth, but that was cutting into other areas of my life. Or maybe I was doing, you know, I felt like I was doing pretty good at work, but maybe I wasn't doing as good in my marriage. And so you're never going to be perfect, right? You're never going to have that perfect equalness across all 6 of those categories, or whatever categories you decide for yourself. But the goal, rather than like trying to be great at everything, really the goal was, and my mentor's name is Steve, what he's really trying to help me understand is to prioritize different things and to try to establish a healthy balance. So everything comes at a cost, right? Anytime we talked last week about spending individual time with your with your children, that obviously comes at a cost. When you spend time with one kid versus the other, it comes at a cost. But if the goal is to be balanced, right? You're not going to be able to be the world's best employee and work 80 hours a week and go to the gym and work out 13 hours a week. I mean, you just can't do it all, right? But what we can do is we can try to live balanced. So if you're able to think through, how are your children doing? How are they doing physically? Are they getting, you know, are they eating decently healthy? That can be really challenging in COVID, right? I just read that like the average American has gained 17 pounds since March. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah,
but,
or like 50% of Americans.
Yeah. So, you know, so how is your kid just like munching all day and finding random bags of Cheetos that you thought you had hidden? And you know, so how are they doing eating wise? How are they sleeping? We already talked about that. You know, just how are they are they able to get some exercise, able to get some fresh air? So how are they doing physically? How are they doing psychologically, right? So mentally, like, are they down all the time? Are they, you know, do they have like these really drastic mood swings? And then finally, like relational, how are they doing with you in their relationship? How are they doing friendship wise? How are they doing with their, you know, with their extended family, people that they have relationships with? Or think about your children and who did they have relationships with in January, February that they might not have relationships with anymore, or the relationships are a lot more complicated because they're not seeing each other at school, or they're not seeing their cousins as often. You know, are there ways for you to help them stay connected? So I don't really like the word homework, but if you're able to, over the next week, spend some time thinking through different categories, you know, you can, even if you really want to go like super nerd on it, you can like give yourself a score, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing health-wise? On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing in different relationships in your life? And then do a little bit of that inventory around your kids as well, and potentially even have a conversation with them, right? You can check, you can do it. It's not going to be maybe not as deep depending on their age, but you can do a check-in with them and say, you know, hey, how are you sleeping? How are you eating? I mean, all that.
Yeah.
I think again, during this time of, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty and uneasiness, having some consistency and checking in on your life to make sure that one category isn't, you're doing really, really well on, and 2 or 3 other categories you're completely tanking on. What are ways that we can try to establish some balance?
Mm-hmm. And I think, especially for you guys who have middle school or high school age students, what you're doing is you're promoting resiliency, because unfortunately they're going to have other challenges in their life down the road. And so what you're doing is you're helping them learn skills to navigate difficult situations, to take care of themselves in the midst of difficult situations, and so that they can come out the other side stronger, healthier, better adjusted individuals. And so I think that that's really important. So while we may not be great at teaching them geometry, I think there's a lot of social emotional skills that we can be teaching our kids in the midst of this.
We're almost done.
Yeah, so I will say one of the things that I keep telling myself is we are in this together. I'm very thankful to have a person to do life with who I enjoy and who challenges me and holds me accountable to things. And so he reminds me regularly when I get stressed out, hey, you know, we're all together, we love each other, and so it'll be okay, right? So I think that that's really important, is to focus on that, focus on your family and being together and spending time together. I think the other thing that I keep reminding myself as well is I'm a finite human being. And you can read all these wonderful articles, and I'm going to put some in the chat. You can, you know, participate in all these Facebook discussions and dialogues. You can, you know, listen to these great parenting workshops. But just recognizing that you're doing the best you can, right? And if you continue to try to do the best you can and continue to love your children well, like, you are already light years ahead of a lot of other parents. And really, those are the important things that your kids need. They need to know that they are loved and they are cared for, and you're with them in the midst of all of this. So that was all that we had prepared for right now. I did want to hear from you guys about what are some topics either that we could spend a little bit of time today talking about, or some things that you think would be important. So we have 2 more weeks of this. So I would love to hear from you. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. And I would love to hear from you guys.
Well, I do have a question. Liam and Loka are, well, I signed them up for preschool starting this September. They didn't go this last year. I haven't heard back yet from CPS yet. But I'm just feeling like mixed emotions of them going for the first time with all of this going on, and if they have to wear masks, and if they're not going to be able to touch the other kids or play with the other kids. You know, I don't want it to be a traumatic experience for their first time. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or do you think, should I wait? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, it's like you were in our living room earlier, and I know we don't have preschoolers, and I said that they know how to wear masks, but it's really hard to know what's the right decision for your family. And I think that's something that you guys will just have to continue to think through. I think for us, what we have talked about, and we're still trying to figure this out, is there are social benefits to being in school. It's harder for preschoolers because there's like no boundaries in preschool kids, right? But there is a huge social component to school, and I think that kids are missing their friends, and they're missing, you know, preschool's an important time to like develop some of those skills. So I think having a conversation with the school, what would this look like at the preschool level? How are you ensuring kids' safety, because we know they're not going to be able to continuously wear their masks. We know that they're going to touch each other and touch everything. So are they doing smaller class sizes? You know, what are efforts that they're doing? Are they making sure to wash kids' hands and sanitize and all that kind of stuff? CPS is a huge system, so you might not get like as much access to the administration and things like that that you might get at a smaller private school, or even our kids went to a like a not-for-profit preschool program in the community, so they didn't go to the district, and so it was smaller, so you could have some of these conversations with the people that were decision makers or teachers of your kids and stuff like that. So what other thoughts?
That's super challenging. Like, I think like my first thought is like, no matter what, you're not going to make the wrong decision. Like, if you're a proactive parent, which you are, and you're trying to get information, you're trying to become the you know, the most well-informed as possible. CPS, it's a CPS school, right? Yeah, so they're supposed to. I heard they're going to release their plan, their school reopening plan this week. You know, so you're like doing your research on that. I mean, maybe even we have one of our boys has a genetic disorder. So you know, Jackie was that mom that, like, you know, called the pediatrician's office like a bunch of times and finally got a hold of the pediatrician and said, hey, in light of our kid's genetic disorder, what does that mean for him returning to school? I mean, if you do all those kind of things, which are almost more character stuff than like actuality, those things are more important, right? If you're the proactive parent that's really like putting your kids forward first and you know, trying to become well-informed, then whether you send your kid or not, you're making the right decision. Because I mean, preschool is really important in regards to like socialization and so forth, but it's also like kids turn out just fine not having gone to preschool, right? So there's no like one easy answer. I think the answer is be proactive. You know, you two have conversations with each other, and no matter what, you'll make the right decision.
Okay, thank you so much. I think I might wait and see, like, if they have an open house, if it's their first time, like where they can meet the teacher, just see how the environment is and how things will look, and hopefully make a decision then, because I really have been wanting to send them to preschool, but you know, I don't want them to be traumatized, but I guess we'll see.
Super resilient. The things that we find traumatizing, they're kind of oblivious to a lot of times. And I would just say for us as parents, like, we take our kids' school like one day at a time, even in like a normal world, right? So, and sometimes they've had some really great experiences and they've had some not great experiences. And so recognizing, hey, this is a solution that we're comfortable with today. That may change next week, and we may say, hey, nope, you can't go to school anymore. We don't feel comfortable with it. Or, you know, we want you to go to school now. You know, just recognizing that we're all sort of figuring this out. And even the schools, like, they may come up with this fabulous plan, and then they do it for 2 weeks and go, okay, just kidding, we can't do that anymore. That's not turning out like we thought it would. So.
Yeah. We had a meeting with a principal today, and that was part of the conversation. This principal, I mean, you don't normally hear school officials saying, "Here's our plan," and it all might change in 3 weeks, right? So I think like that's part of how we're all going to have to approach this stuff. And so if you could try something, you can pull your kid out of preschool, right? So you can. It's not like you need to lock it in right now and then you're committed to that decision for the next 9 months. You can lock it in and then a few weeks later say, you know what, this isn't working out best for us.
Yeah, good question. Do you guys have other ones, or Blanca or Terry, do you guys have any questions? All right. Oh, okay, go ahead, Kev.
Of course, there's not a quick, instructive where your temper comes to life with the kids. So how would you manage your anger, because of course they're not gonna listen right away, but you want them to listen. I think we part of the tip that we had last time was just come up with some better idea, right? Like some creative idea, but
Oh, you got muted.
Sorry, it muted. I don't know why. Okay, it's unmuted now.
Right, you
Okay,
said a creative idea.
yeah,
or
creative
what?
idea too. Okay.
what's the best way to accommodate your anger, your self-anger, self-control?
Mhm.
But you have to address the problem right away.
Mhm. So you're not the only one that's thinking about that. Someone from last week's presentation actually reached out and asked to talk with us privately as well. So I think that's something that all parents deal with. It is, if you're co-parenting with someone who's supportive, and around, then you can sort of tap out and go, okay, I can't deal with this right now. When Deacon refused to eat, and I worked all day, came home and cooked a meal, and then he wouldn't eat the meal that I probably asked his input about what he wanted. And he said this, I cooked it, and then he wouldn't eat it. It drove me crazy. And I felt like it was a very personal thing to me, when it was probably not. He was just being a punk, right? It wasn't because he didn't like me or didn't like my food or didn't appreciate me. He was just 5 and didn't want to eat, right? And so I think recognizing why I'm so triggered is really important. So I'm feeling like this is personal. He doesn't value me. I'm stressed out. I'm feeling like, I'm at the end of my rope by the time I walk in the door, and then I have to keep going, right? So I think recognizing why it's so triggering for us, and then are there things that we can do to set up that situation for success? So for example, with dinner, I would come home, the babysitter would leave, and then I would be with the kids, and I would be with them because Joel often wouldn't get home till after they'd go to bed. So I recognized I needed a little break. So I gave myself permission to, when I came home, the babysitter left, I'd say, okay, boys, you need to go play in the basement and play Legos for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. I'm going to sit on the couch and read my book or flip through Facebook or do something. So I'm not talking to anyone for a few minutes, so I can just switch gears and have a few minutes by myself. Until then, I say, okay, come on, and then pick up to being a parent. But I needed a little bit of transition because I just was crabby. And so part of that was about me. It wasn't all about Deacon not eating his dinner. Does that make sense? Did you have anything you wanted to add?
I don't know if you just said this. I mean, it's just so often when our kids don't listen to us, we take it personal, right? But it's ultimately not about, it's about them not listening, not about them not listening to us. And so if we're able to kind of depersonalize it a little bit, because sometimes we have the tendency, you need to kind of check your own language. Like if you're like, hey, you're making me frustrated. I mean, right? Like, is it about me and that they're not listening to me, or that they're just not following instructions? And so I think if we're able to depersonalize some of that disobedience, it helps a little bit. And then I think the other thing, like I was saying before, if there's an opportunity where you can do this kind of personal inventory, and if you realize, hey, because of work, because of finances, like my stress is like through the roof, and because of that, I'm taking it out on my kids a little bit, or I didn't sleep well last night, and so because of that, I'm just getting triggered more easily. If we're able to do some of that personal inventory, I think that will help us a little bit more in the moments.
Yeah. And I think just like communicating to our kids too, I need, what you did was wrong. I need a minute, and then we're going to talk about what happened. Or you go to your room and then I'm going to talk to you in a minute. And that gives us space to sort of calm down, to think about an appropriate response to whatever that behavior was, right? So that we're not disciplining out of anger, which can be hard, especially if it feels like very immediate. I will say, as your kids get older, you have more space because you can send them to their room and you can have that space to think about like what is a leveled and appropriate response to that situation. So we are out of time, but I just wanted to sort of point out, I put these links in the chat, and these are some articles that we got information for this presentation from, and we also just thought were really helpful. So some of them apply more towards young parents or parents of young kids. Others apply to older families with older children. But next week, what we're going to do is we're going to spend some more time talking about support systems and how to develop support systems for our children and for ourselves and to really take care of ourselves better. So again, I thank you so much for coming and joining us tonight. I know this is like right in the middle of bedtime and, you know, it can be hard to find the time. I would encourage you, Blanca, I know you're well connected in Cicero, to feel free to invite other people to be part of this conversation. Kiev and Chrissy, you also know lots of people too. So we would love to have more parents participate. And yeah, we just appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wallens. Good job.
Thanks,
Sound
Sarah.
advice. Sound advice. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Bianca.
Bye.
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 Terry, have a good day.